My name is Maya Calloway. I am 29 years old, and I run a marketing agency in Austin, Texas that works with some of the biggest retail brands in the country. 3 years ago, my sister stood in my parents' kitchen and told everyone I was a selfish, ungrateful woman who didn't deserve the family's support. My parents believed her. They stopped calling. They stopped coming to my apartment for Sunday dinners. They even skipped my birthday that year, and the year after that. Then, last Thursday morning, my sister walked through the front door of my office building with her husband and my father, sat down across from me like nothing had ever happened, and slid a document across my desk demanding 40% of everything I had built. I looked at that document. Then I looked at her, and I smiled. She thought that smile meant she had won. She had no idea what was already in motion. But I should start at the beginning. Because none of this will make sense unless you understand what happened 3 years ago and why that day changed everything about the way I see the people who are supposed to love you. Before I had my own agency, I was working as a junior marketing strategist at a mid-size firm downtown. I was good at my job. Really good. I had a gift for understanding what made people stop scrolling, what made them click, what made them pull out their credit card. My manager at the time told me I had instincts that most people in the industry spent a decade trying to develop. I was 25 and I believed her. My sister, Claire, had always been the one my parents were proud of. She married well, in their opinion. Her husband, Marcus, was in real estate development. They had a big house in the suburbs, a golden retriever, and a habit of showing up to family dinners and talking about their investment portfolio for 45 minutes while the food got cold. I never disliked Marcus in those early years. He was a little arrogant, but I figured that came with the territory. He had been successful, and successful people sometimes wore that success in ways that made everyone around them slightly uncomfortable. The problem started when Marcus's business hit a rough patch. 3 of his development projects stalled at the same time. Permits got delayed, contractors pulled out, and 2 investors walked away from a deal he had been counting on. He came to me for help. Not because he respected my abilities. I understood that later. He came to me because I was free. He asked me to redesign the marketing strategy for his real estate company. New branding, new website copy, new pitch decks, new social media presence. He wanted it done in 6 weeks. I told him I would help him. He was family, so for 6 weeks, I worked my full-time job during the day and spent my evenings rebuilding everything for his company from the ground up. I wrote the copy. I redesigned the visual identity. I built out the content calendar. I created investor presentation materials that were, honestly, some of the best work I had ever done. His business recovered. Within 4 months of launching the new brand, he closed 2 deals and brought back one of the investors who had walked away. He told everyone at a family dinner that he had turned things around through his own persistence and smart decision-making. My name came up once, briefly, when my mother asked if I had helped at all. He said I had done a little design work. My sister nodded like that was exactly what she remembered. I let it go. I told myself it didn't matter. Family helps family, and you don't keep score. Then Marcus started asking for more. A campaign for a new project he was launching. Updated pitch materials. An email sequence for potential buyers. Each time, I said yes. Each time, the work disappeared into his business and came back out wearing his name. About 8 months into this arrangement, I decided it was time to start my own agency. I had been thinking about it for a long time. I had enough clients lined up from my own network, enough saved to cover 6 months of operating costs, and enough confidence in my abilities to make the leap. I gave notice at my job. I signed a lease on a small office space. I registered the business under the name Calloway Creative. I told my family at dinner the following Sunday. My mother looked nervous. My father asked how much money I had saved. Marcus immediately asked whether I was planning to take on outside clients or just work for the family. I looked at him across the table. Just work for the family. I repeated the words slowly in my head to make sure I had understood them correctly. As if the past 8 months had established something. As if helping him out of a difficult season had become a permanent arrangement. As if my agency was already, in some way, his. I told him I would be taking on clients from across different industries and that my time would be limited going forward. Claire put her fork down. She looked at me the way she used to look at me when we were teenagers, and she thought I was being dramatic. "You could at least give Marcus a discount," she said. "He helped make you who you are." I asked her how exactly he had done that. She said that being part of a successful family had given me credibility, that Marcus's connections had opened doors for me, that I should think about who had supported me before I started acting like I built everything alone. I was so stunned that I didn't respond right away. The table got quiet. My father cleared his throat. My mother started talking about something else entirely. And Marcus looked at me with a small, patient smile, like he was waiting for me to come around. That night I went home and thought about all of it for a long time, and I made a decision. I would complete one final project for Marcus, the one I had already half promised, and after that, I would stop. I would be professional about it. I would not make it a scene. I would simply redirect my energy into my own clients. What I did not anticipate was that Marcus had already been telling people something very different about the nature of our arrangement. I found out 3 weeks later when I got an email from a former colleague who had been approached by Marcus about a branding project. He mentioned, almost casually, that Marcus had told him I was essentially the in-house creative director for his real estate company and that any work I did independently was an extension of that relationship. I called Marcus immediately. I told him what my colleague had said. He was quiet for a moment and then told me I was misunderstanding the situation. I was not misunderstanding anything. He had been telling people in his network that my agency and his real estate company were connected. He had been using my reputation, which I had spent years building, to give his business additional credibility. And he had been doing it without telling me. I told him clearly that this was not true and that he needed to stop saying it. He told me I was being dramatic and that I should talk to Claire if I had a problem with how the family operated. What happened next was the part I was not prepared for. Claire called me the following evening. I expected an apology, or at least an acknowledgement that Marcus had overstepped. Instead, she told me that I had always had a problem with gratitude. She said that I had used Marcus's network to build my client list, that I owed the family for the foundation they had given me, and that instead of honoring that, I was throwing it back in their faces. I told her none of that was true. She said I was being selfish. My mother got on the phone. She said she didn't want to take sides. Then she said she thought I should think about what family meant and what I was willing to sacrifice to protect it. What she meant was that I should sacrifice my business, my boundaries, and my sense of what was actually true. I understood then that this was not going to be resolved with a conversation. They had already decided on a version of events, and they were not interested in mine. I said goodbye and hung up the phone. I sat in my apartment for a long time that night. Then I started working. The next 3 years were the most focused years of my life. I threw everything into Calloway Creative. I brought on 2 employees in the first year, 4 more in the second. I landed a contract with a regional clothing brand that turned into a long-term partnership. I developed a proprietary framework for retail content strategy that my team used across every client account. By the 3rd year, we were working with 11 brands, including 2 national names that my mother would have recognized from her favorite TV commercials. I built all of it without a single referral from Marcus's network, without $1 of family support, without one phone call of encouragement from anyone who shared my last name. My parents sent me a text on my birthday each year. That was the extent of contact. I stopped expecting more than that. I stopped spending my Sunday evenings wondering if they would call. I built a life that fit inside the space I had, and slowly, that space started to feel like enough. Then came last Thursday. It was early morning. I was at my desk going through a proposal when my office manager, Priya, knocked on the door with an expression I had never seen on her before. She was trying to look neutral, but her eyes were doing something else entirely. "There are 3 people asking for you in the lobby," she said carefully. "They say they're your family." I set down my coffee. "My father," she said. "Your sister." "And a man named Marcus." I did not say anything for a moment. I looked at the proposal on my desk. I looked at the photograph on the wall of my team at our 2-year anniversary celebration. Then I told Priya to put them in the small conference room and give me 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes, I did not spend panicking. I spent them making 2 phone calls. Then I walked down the hall. My father looked older than I remembered. He was dressed well, which told me this was not a casual visit. Claire sat with her hands folded on the table, her expression arranged into something that was trying to look like warmth but landed closer to calculation. Marcus sat beside her with the same patient smile I remembered from that dinner table 3 years ago. He looked around my conference room with an appreciation that made my jaw tighten. "Nice operation," he said. "Bigger than I expected." I sat down. I did not offer coffee. I asked them what I could do for them. My father leaned forward and said that they hadn't come to fight. They had come because they missed me and because they had a business opportunity they wanted to share. Claire slid a folder across the table. Inside was a document. Several pages, printed on heavy paper. "A partnership proposal," she said. "Marcus's company and yours. We think it makes a lot of sense." I opened the folder. The first page outlined a merger of brand identity and client resources. The second page specified equity distribution. 40% of Calloway Creative transferred to Marcus's real estate company. I read it twice to make sure I had understood it correctly. I asked her what Marcus's company would be contributing in exchange. Claire said his network, his investor relationships, and his credibility in the local business community. I looked at that word. Credibility. I almost laughed. Marcus leaned forward and said that their company had been going through some restructuring and that a partnership with a successful agency would signal strength to their investors. He said it would be mutually beneficial. He said the word, mutually, like he genuinely believed it. I told them that 40% of my company was not something I would be handing over based on a first conversation, and that any partnership decision would need to go through my full team and legal counsel. My father nodded, like this was reasonable. Claire's expression flickered. Marcus said, of course, that was smart, that we could formalize everything at a company-wide meeting. Then the room shifted slightly. My father folded his hands on the table. He said that he hoped I understood the situation fully. He said that the business community in Austin was smaller than people thought, and that reputations were fragile things. He said it the way people say things when they want you to hear something that they are not quite saying directly. Claire said it more directly. She looked at me and said that if I wasn't willing to work with the family, she couldn't promise that the things she had heard about how I ran my business would stay private. I stared at her. She held my gaze. "There are people who have concerns about your methods," she said. "I wouldn't want that to become a problem for you." I understood exactly what she was doing. She was threatening to go to my clients, possibly to the 2 national brands whose contracts represented nearly 40% of my annual revenue, and say whatever she needed to say to damage those relationships. She was betting that the fear of losing those contracts would make me sign the document. I looked at my father. He did not look away, but he also did not say anything to stop her. I looked back at Claire. I picked up the folder. I placed it on top of the papers I had been reviewing when they arrived. And then I told them that a decision this significant deserved a proper setting, that I would call a meeting with my leadership team and our advisors that afternoon, and that they were welcome to present the partnership proposal in front of everyone. Marcus sat up a little straighter. He liked that idea. He liked the image of it. Himself, standing at the head of a conference table, presenting terms, walking out with 40% of something he had never touched. I walked them back to the lobby. Before the elevator doors closed, Marcus looked at me with genuine confidence and said that he was glad we were doing this the right way. I smiled and told him I would see them at 4 o'clock. The moment the elevator light went out, I went back to my office and made 3 more calls. By 3:30, the main conference room at Calloway Creative was full. My operations director was there, my 2 senior account managers, our agency attorney, who I had asked to come in person rather than by phone. 3 of my founding investors who had backed the agency in its first year, one of whom had driven 40 minutes to be there. And a woman named Dr. Sandra Okafor, who is a forensic accountant I had worked with on a client fraud case 18 months earlier, someone I trusted and who had agreed. When I called her that morning to come in with her associate, my father arrived first and immediately looked uncomfortable at how many people were in the room. Claire looked at the attorney. Marcus looked at Dr. Okafor and her associate, and something shifted behind his eyes, just briefly, before his smile came back. I thanked everyone for coming. I said that we were there to review a proposed partnership and that I believed in full transparency when it came to any decision affecting the company. I invited Marcus to present the proposal. He stood up. He was smooth. I'll give him that. He talked about synergy and combined market positioning and the value of a unified brand strategy. He used the right vocabulary. He said the word leverage 4 times. When he finished, he placed the folder in the center of the table and said he was confident this was the beginning of something strong. I let the silence sit for a moment, then I thanked him. I said that before we moved forward, I wanted to make sure everyone in the room understood who we would be partnering with. Marcus nodded, still smiling, and said he welcomed the due diligence. I said that when I received the proposal that morning, I had made some calls. I had reached out to 2 of Marcus's former business partners and one of his previous investors. I turned to Dr. Okafor and asked her to share what she had found. Marcus stood up. He said that this was not part of the agenda. Dr. Okafor opened her folder. Her associate connected a laptop to the conference room screen. A spreadsheet appeared. Company names, registration dates, dissolution dates. Marcus had founded 4 businesses in the past 7 years. 3 of them had closed within 18 months of opening. That alone was not damning. Businesses failed. Everyone in the room knew that. But then the next slide appeared. 2 of those businesses had outside investors. Combined investment total of just under $1.4 million. Dr. Okafor calmly walked through a series of transfers. Money that had moved from business operating accounts into a personal LLC that Marcus had registered under a variation of his middle name. She had traced it through 3 layers of transfers before it landed in an account that was definitively his. The room was very quiet. My father looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the screen. Then he looked at me with an expression that was no longer patient and no longer smiling. He said that I had no right to investigate his personal finances. I told him that I had every right to investigate anyone asking for 40% of my company. Our attorney confirmed this was accurate. Claire grabbed the folder from the center of the table. She said this meeting was over. I told her she was welcome to leave. I also told her that Dr. Okafor had already forwarded the financial summary to 2 of the original investors who had retained their own legal counsel as of that morning. Marcus's voice lost its steadiness for the first time. He asked what I had done. I told him I had done exactly what he came here expecting me to do, which was be thorough. My father sat very still. He had not spoken since Marcus began presenting. He did not speak now either. He looked at the screen, and then he looked at his hands, and then he looked at nothing in particular. Claire looked at me with something I had not expected to see on her face. Not anger, not defiance. Something closer to shame. Though she recovered from it quickly, she said I had embarrassed the family. I said the family had embarrassed itself. She reached for Marcus's arm and told him they were going. Before they left the room, I said one more thing. I said it quietly because it was not meant for the room, it was meant for my sister. I told her that 3 years ago. She had stood in my parents' kitchen and called me selfish for choosing my own business over an arrangement that was never fair to begin with. I told her I had spent 3 years wondering whether she was right, whether I had been ungrateful, whether I had failed at being a good daughter, a good sister, a good member of the family. I told her I was done wondering. She did not respond. She walked out with Marcus. My father followed, slowly, without looking at me. The room stayed quiet for a moment after they left. Then my operations director asked if I was okay. I told her yes, which was mostly true. Our attorney reminded me that the investor's Dr. Okafor had contacted would likely pursue this independent of anything I did going forward, which meant the situation would resolve itself without requiring anything more from me. I thanked Dr. Okafor. She shook my hand and told me she was glad the morning call had given her enough time to prepare. I sat at the head of that conference table for a few minutes after everyone else had returned to their desks. I thought about the version of myself from 3 years ago, sitting alone in her apartment on a Sunday night, trying to figure out what she had done wrong, why the people who were supposed to be in her corner had chosen a different corner entirely. I thought about all the Sunday evenings I had spent building something out of nothing, in silence, while my family had dinners I was not invited to. I thought about my father's face when the spreadsheet appeared on the screen. The way his expression did not look like anger toward Marcus. It looked like a man realizing, perhaps for the first time, that he had placed his trust in the wrong direction for a very long time. He called me that evening. I did not answer. I was not ready for that conversation yet. Maybe I would be someday. I was not sure. What I knew was that I had spent 3 years learning that the people who love you are not always the ones who share your blood, and the people who share your blood are not always capable of loving you the way you deserve. That was not a lesson I wanted to learn. But I had learned it, and it had made me into someone I was genuinely proud of. My agency was intact. My clients were intact. My team had watched me handle the hardest morning of my professional life with composure, and the look on their faces when I came back to the floor told me that what we had built together meant something. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. I went back to my desk, picked up the proposal I had been reviewing when Priya knocked on my door that morning, and I finished it. It was a campaign for a women's clothing brand based in Nashville. The concept was about women who built things for themselves, from nothing, without asking permission. I thought it was some of the best work I had ever written.